I'll start this off by paraphrasing what an old Chinese colleague said about the evolution of Chinese policy on the Korean Peninsula. We had him over to a conference in 1993, and he took me aside once and said, "You know, you Americans have to understand how much this situation has changed in the last 40 years. You were in Korea in '52, and you saw the devastation. And we fought you." And he said, "Today, we have moved a long way. We have recognized the ROK. We have gone to the Olympics. Our trade with the ROK is booming. The whole situation has changed radically over the last 40 years. But it's changed in an evolutionary way. You've moved from direct conflict on the Korean Peninsula to how to make peace, and how to develop, and how to reconcile and reunify. These are the things that we're dealing with today." And he also had been in North Korea recently, and he did say in 1993 that famine was coming to North Korea. And of course it came very heavily in 94, 95. But he saw the conditions there and saw that they were heading to a train wreck on their agricultural policy. But he put it in much more gentle terms. I think what strikes me about this is, having been in Korea in 1952 and seeing the absolute devastation of South Korea, flying over from Seoul, over Busan down to Japan, you could see it out of the nose of a plane. You could see the forests smashed, the villages, the destruction was incredible. And the issues were at that time the preservation of the ROK against a North Korean invasion. That has changed radically too. And what we're dealing with today is a free trade agreement. We're having trouble with it, but that's what we're negotiating on. We are talking about overall security. We are talking about a changing security environment. And you're seeing an evolution that's coming over the last 40 years, which has changed the whole nature of our connection with the ROK, with China, with Pyongyang. This same thing happened in Southeast Asia. When I was in Southeast Asia in the 1950s, we were talking about containing China. The Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, SEATO they called it, consisted of United States, Pakistan, Thailand, Philippines. And the whole emphasis was on stopping the Chinese aggression in Southeast Asia through the support of local communist parties, through other military activity. If you look at what's happened today, it's strikingly different. You do have the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, emerging as a stronger force, and you have it taking on regional problems, not only a free trade area agreement with China, but they're dealing with piracy, they're dealing with narcotics, they're dealing with terrorism. After the end of the Vietnam War in '75, till today, you see a changing Asia. And you see ourselves dealing with very different problems and dealing with them in a more regional way. One of the most appealing things about all of this is the positive trends on the Korean Peninsula. When the North Koreans had their nuclear test in 2006, there was very little offset, downgrade in the South Korean financial markets. It did not have much effect, which tells you that the traditional method of the North Koreans to use military power to disrupt conditions in South Korea, such as the '83 bombing in Rangoon or the blowing up of K-858 in '87, could affect South Korea. But this time it did not. And I think that this is important to understand, that when you also look at the effects of the U.S. economy on South Korea, you see more and more that a drop in the U.S. economy, some estimates say of 1%, would only lead to less than 0.4% in the South Korean economy. These are very positive signs. And the other positive sign is when South Korea joined the International Monetary Fund 50 years ago, it had a $400 US dollar per capita income. It is now, of course, the 11th largest economy in the world. This is a very important trend. But at the same time, you see this trend in Korea that you see in other countries in Asia is the growing disparities of wealth. And you find this a destabilizing factor, whether it's in China, whether it's in Taiwan, Korea, North Korea, or Southeast Asia. I figure we should talk about the six-party talks in Beijing. They started Wednesday, and I think we Americans recognize the different approaches, different priorities of our partners in these talks, the ROK, China, US, Japan, the four major powers in there. That certainly we realize that our friends in ROK, although they want strong military deterrence, they feel that the answer to the North Korean problem is essentially economic evolution and development. I think that they feel that the weapons of mass destruction are a secondary priority. I think China senses the same way. It is driven to use its economic power, its own experiences, to begin to influence North Korea to make the right decisions. And this is more important to China than getting at the weapons of mass destruction. And they see that that they can influence North Korea gradually, in an evolutionary sense, to begin to move in a direction that reconnects them with the six-party talks and begins to get the concrete moves that they've made before but are making again towards a denuclearization weapons of the Korean Peninsula. But as you know, both China and the ROK fear the collapse of North Korea perhaps more than we do. In fact, we've been accused of trying to change the regime. I don't see that reflected in any current conversations I've heard. The U.S. is willing to accept what you are doing, ROK is doing in North Korea, and what the Chinese are doing. And all we ask is that they understand that the weapons of mass destruction and the proliferation thereof are a very important key issue for us. And I think that's where we've made the progress with the North.